Hey, welcome to the Dream Big podcast with Bob Goff and friends. I'm Scott Schimmel here, as always, with my pal, Bob Goff.
Hey, everyone. I'm so glad you're with us today. It's going to be a great show.
Well, Bob, I love students. I've always focused my career on helping teenagers. My biggest ambition has been to help them figure out how to grow in self-awareness, build meaningful lives. So for the last 8 years, I've been leading this company, creating curriculum and training for them. But then this whole pandemic thing happened. Schools literally shut down, and the entire focus of what I've been pursuing changed like literally overnight. And I know I'm not the only one. I know so many people have had major setbacks to the pursuit of their dreams.
Yeah, I think all of us need to decide how we're going to pivot, whether we can do that pivot and leave a bunch of skid marks, or are we going to pivot and kind of glide through it? And some of us will have an easier time than others in making that change. And so don't be too hard on yourself if you've had difficulty, but to just remember why you started doing what you're doing. That's what I always am trying to do. Why did I start this in the first place? Then when your circumstances come and they throw a curve at you, you can kind of lean into that with a little bit more confidence.
Well, and good thing, it's not just all of us that's trying to figure out how to pivot, but we've got a great guest on the podcast this week, Jamie Ivey, who's certainly learned how to pivot in her own life and deal with setbacks. How do you know Jamie?
Oh, Jamie's been a friend for a while now, and I've, like so many people, have followed her in the things that she's doing. Particularly her podcast is so well received by so many people. And so if you haven't had a chance to be introduced to Jamie before, you might tune into her podcast. I know I've learned a ton from her, and I know you will too.
Well, listen in as Bob talks with Jamie Ivey.
Hey, Jamie, thank you so much for being on the show. It's good to see you. I'm looking at you on Zoom.
I'm so happy to be here. Really, I am. Thank you.
You've got a podcast that's followed by so many people, and I'm just so anxious for you to let the people listening on the Dream Big podcast learn about some of the way that you got to where you are right now. So could you just start by telling a little bit about who you are for the 6 people that haven't heard of you ever?
I would love to. So I live in Austin, Texas with my husband, Aaron, who's a pastor at our church. We have 4 kids, 2 dogs. I'm trying to grow a garden. It's an every year thing for me. I'm trying to grow a garden, and I will not give up until I slice my own tomatoes. I have the podcast. I'm an author and travel and speak, and just love when my family is all together under one roof, and that is happening all the time right now. So I'm loving it.
I think you've probably identified there's so many people kind of nodding their head to say, gosh, I actually have experienced some of the same things. And that's why I think you're just such a great voice. I want to loop back to this garden of yours. I hope you're getting some little things popping up. I had a neighbor named Doug, and he was a little bit gullible, and he told me he was planting potatoes, and he was so proud of his potato plants. And so in the evening, I got out there after they were like a full 6 inches tall. I buried 5 pounds of russet potatoes underneath these. And I went out and said, Doug, do you think the potatoes are ready yet? He's like, well, I don't know, maybe. And so we started digging these things up, and he started losing his mind as there's these like 2-pound potatoes coming out. And then about the time he pulled the 4th one out, it still had the sticker on it. I was like, rats. So
if my kids did that to me, I'd be so happy. I would think I finally had a garden, but
yes, the carrots the size of your leg. One of the things that we have been talking about at Dream Big is having an ambition and then looking for an opportunity for that ambition. And the thing that we want to spend a little bit of time with you on today is to clear the path. And by that, if this is the first time you're listening in, clear the path is some of the limiting beliefs, some of the things that have kept you. You're not smart enough, you're not wise enough, you're not old enough, you're not young enough, you're whatever, the things that have kept you away. I know you've accomplished a lot of things in your life. Tell me about some of the clearing of the path that you've had to do along the way as you've lived fully into who God's made you to be.
Yeah, well, I think when you told me we were going to talk about that, I immediately think to when I started my podcast. And I've been doing this for 6 years. And so on some way, it was before a lot of people were podcasting, but podcasting's been around for, a while. But I remember when I thought about starting the show, I had all of the lies like, who would want to listen to this? What do I have to say? Is there any reason why I should spend my hours creating something that possibly my mom and my husband would only listen to? And so that was a lot of lies for me. But I want to tell you real quick, Bob, how I even got to podcasting is in 2011, I was driving in town and I had all my kids in the car, probably driving them to soccer practice or something. I have no idea. And my local country radio station came on and said that there was an open audition for the morning show. Like you could be a DJ on the morning show.
Yes.
I thought, well, that sounds fun. I've never done radio. At that point in my life, I'd never spoken into a microphone. I'd never been on a stage. I'd never done anything that my life looks like today. But I just thought, you know what? I think that would be so much fun. So I drop my kids off wherever we were going. I get home and I tell my husband, I'm like, you have to help me. I got to record a 60-second demo. And so longest story ever is that I sent in a demo. There was no reason that I should have. I'd never worked in radio. And I ended up winning that job. And so when I got that job out of nowhere, I then had to battle lies too. Like, man, I was so proud of myself for stepping out. And like, it's kind of when you talk about that ambition meets opportunity, like that sounds like a really awesome job. And then here was this radio station having a random contest and it just kind of all happened. And so I got the job and loved it. And then, ended up not working there for that long. But when I started my podcast, I remember having those same feelings of, I don't think I should do this. And I would keep reminding myself, well, you did this once before. Like you stepped out before. And so I think that helped me when I was having those thoughts of, Jamie, no one will listen to your show. You have nothing to say. This is dumb. You don't know what you're doing. Is I had to kind of go back to myself, myself 4 years ago and go, you didn't know what you were doing then. And you stepped out and did it and look at where it's gotten you. So I think of that moment when I think of this kind of ambition to do something, this rare opportunity, and how that changed literally the rest of my career was saying yes to that audition.
Yeah, isn't it crazy? And if you're listening, there might be something you're resonating with. You just say, it wasn't a DJ that I wanted to be, but it was a degree I wanted to get. It was a relationship I wanted to pursue. It was a place I wanted to go. It was a talent that I wanted to learn. Insert your thing here. And then I love that illustration of just saying, go for it. Like, give it a whirl. Like a bad day isn't having not getting the job. A bad day would be not turning in the tape.
So true. And I look back and even though I did end up winning, I think had I not won, the whole process would have been enough for me. I mean, it was so exciting for me to try something new. It was so exciting for me to put myself out there. It sparked something in me that I had never felt before. And
yeah,
had I not won, I would still look back on that story and go, that was one of the best things that happened to me.
There's something about just participating, getting some skin in the game. I wanted to go to Harvard in the worst way possible. And so I applied. It was like $50. And they immediately said, oh, heck no. There's no awesome ending to the story. I applied. They said no. I moved on with my life. Rather than just saying, I wish someday I could, whatever. If you've got that thing, you are like one postage stamp and a little bit of time online away from giving it a whirl. And instead of waiting for all the qualifications or all the validation from a father that didn't give you validation or a friend who saw you as less capable than you actually knew you were, to actually lean into that, that's clearing the path. And so this idea of writing these things down to say, these are my ambitions. These are the impediments. These are the perceived impediments, which is my perceived impediment. I need to go to DJ school. Perceived impediment. I need a bunch of equipment. Perceived impediment. I need to know which end of the microphone to talk into. Actual impediment, one stamp.
Truly is. And I look back at the show when I started it in 2014, and I didn't have the fancy microphone I have today. I didn't have an editor that was editing for me. I didn't have an assistant to book all the guests. It was just me and my Apple headphones, not even the ones we have now, like the ones with the cord. That was my microphone. And that's how I started my show. And there's a part of me that can go, man, it didn't sound the best, all the kind of things, but I started. And had I never started, I wouldn't be here today 6 years later.
I love the idea of know what you want, then use what you got. One of the things that we say, I know what I want, but then to say, but I feel like I need to do this and this and this and this and this before I get there. I just say, like, what do you got right now? Whatever you've got right now, we're going to go with that. And one of the things that'll happen if you're listening, you have an ambition that's unexecuted. You just need to know with specificity what it is. Like you said, I want to learn, I want to find out if I could be a DJ on that. And we think sometimes when we make that decision that it's a failure if 40 years later you're not in that position as the DJ. How long did that gig last for?
Well, it lasted only for 4 months, and I'll tell you why. In 2010, my final 2 kids joined our family through adoption. And so I have 1 biological, I have 3 children through adoption. And in January of 2010, my last son came home from Haiti. 2 of my kids were born in Haiti. And so this is 2011 when I step out and send in my audition tape and end up getting the job. And my life at home turned upside down when I started working. My children were still needing so much from me as bonding and a stable parent at home. And so I ended up quitting to go back home to be with my kids. And Bob, I look at that and listen, I'm way over that. I'm way past that. I love my job now. But I remember at that time thinking, God, this isn't fair. Like this, it felt like, why would you open up this job for me and then ask me to come home? And so I came home for my kids and I would do it again in a heartbeat. But because I stepped out is the only reason I would have ever started my show 4 years later. And so I see it as just the greatest blessing.
We were talking about your garden, and some of people who have been listening to this podcast for a while know my favorite clip out of We Bought a Zoo is that moment where he says, all you need is 20 seconds of insane courage. You had that 20 seconds and you just said, you know what, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to actually do this thing and see what happens. And so if you're listening, what's your 20 seconds of insane courage? Tell me about the role of faith. I know faith is important to you. It's not for everybody that's listening to this show. And we just want everybody to feel welcome. I just want you to tune in and smell the cookies in the oven. But faith has been important to you. What role? People will say, well, God opened up this door or he did that. And I know when people say, well, God told me, and I am a couple decades into this adventure and he hasn't told me anything. Like I haven't heard the audible voice of God yet. And I keep asking him, like, just tell me one sentence, one word, I'll buy a vowel, like anything. And I don't get that. I do get some other things, like there's things that are written down in scripture. I say like, well, that's actually, it sounds a lot like me when I'm reading it out loud, but it sounds like his words. But what interaction do you have? Like, how are you guided towards one thing? How do you clear the path? And what's your relationship of faith with that?
Yeah, faith is super important to me. It hasn't always been in my whole life. I grew up in a home where faith was important, but it didn't become important to me until my early 20s. And it is like this foundation for me that I feel safe with, I feel at home with. I trust God with my life and with his plan for me. And when you talk about hearing from God, I mean, it can sound totally like, I don't even understand what that means. And for me, it means this, is that when I'll use that DJ example. When I'm in the world, in this job that I feel like, Bob, I mean, I'm telling you, I thought this is the job of my life. I am so happy here. I've never had more fun in a job. I felt like this is where I'm supposed to be. But I would pray and just be like, God, I need you to fix my home because my children, they need me and I can't be there for them. And so can you step in and take care of this for me? And I just felt in my soul, and I can't explain it, except I just felt in my soul that, and again, I'm going to say it, God telling me, I need you to go home for right now. I need you to go home for right now. And it was this feeling that I couldn't shake. And I would pray about it. And it just became abundantly clear to me that God wasn't being mean to me. He wasn't pulling anything away from me, but he was just saying, hey, I want you to go back and be with your kids. And, I think looking back, it's easy to see things where in the moment it felt, this is not fair. This feels scary. But looking back, I am grateful that I know that I chose my kids over that, and I would choose them over anything for any day. But I also am grateful that God gave me that taste of that career, because my career is not working in radio anymore, but it is working in my own show. And I don't, have a boss, and I don't have to show up at 5 a.m. either if I don't want to. And so that is, great. But I think it was just, it's this way of me saying, God is the one who is my foundation and my strength and really does guide me in everything that I do.
One of the things that'll happen along the way, we'll each have disappointments. And sometimes they're small d disappointments and sometimes they're capital D disappointment, something that just goes horribly different than you planned. I remember when I met Sweet Maria, I was just like smitten. I'm picking out names for our kids, and she's only been in the room for a minute. So I waited till the second day or the third day before I showed up at her house. And because she just lived across the alley, she had just moved in. I showed up and I brought with me a square of like fur from the fabric store and some buttons and some thread. And I knocked on the door and she opened it. She's like, "Oh, Bob, like, what are you doing here?" And I'm like, "Do you want to make a teddy bear?" She was so freaked out. So we made this bear together because she's so nice. She's like, we made this little bear. And when it was all done and we put the button nose on it and all that, I pulled out this little piece of red felt. And I said, "Do you want to make a heart?" And she's like, "Oh my gosh." She's like, "Okay." And then get this. We clipped a lock of hair from each of our hair. I said, "Let's put our hair in the heart." Now, this is on the second day that I had met her. Oh, she was so out of there. She was going to get a restraining order. But one of the things that she was very kind about letting me know that this was actually going nowhere, teddy bear or not. I was so disappointed. It felt like a capital D disappointment because it wasn't like maybe later. It was, this ain't happening. And what's a time that you've had a disappointment and then you've actually had to clear the path of that disappointment to move forward? Because this is 33 years and 3 kids later. So we got past the capital D disappointment, but there was a period of time in between. Maybe somebody's listening that's right in the middle of a big disappointment. What's something that's happened and that was a setback for you that you actually had to actually kind of clear the path on to move forward?
I think of 2 things. One, really, really personal. When I was in college, I received some hard news from a family member. I'll just say that without telling anyone's story that is not on the show. I just received some hard news from a family member that, a close family member that really hurt me, and really bothered me, and really, really disappointed me. And that disappointment from a human that I loved and was a really strong presence in my life, it affected me for years and years and years, because I then assumed that every person was going to hurt me like that, if that makes sense.
Oh, no, that makes sense. Like a limiting belief. You go, I will never, ever, ever allow anybody to ever, you make these agreements with yourself.
For sure. And I brought that into my marriage. And so I've done a lot of work around that. And I would say I'm not anywhere where I was, 25 years ago, but that was a big letter disappointment for me. And I just had to kind of really work through that and not take someone else's, not the way someone else disappointed me, and not put that and say everyone in my life is going to do that for me, because that's not fair to anybody else for the next 25 years. And that's been hard work for me.
Is that crazy part? And sometimes we're not aware that what we're doing is we're reacting to something, one of those capital D disappointments from 30 years ago, that if you actually got to know me, eventually you'd reject me. Be like, where did that come from? That's little 8-year-old Bobby Goff trying to get the validation from somebody who wasn't keen on giving validation. And so part of clearing the path is understanding that and then renegotiating that deal to say you need to go back to that 20-year-old you and just cut a new deal to say, that's not who I am. That's not the man I married. That's not... And if we could figure out that stuff, I think we're actually on the road. One of the things that, you had another example of a disappointment.
Example. Oh, I can't remember it now. So it's not even worth anything saying.
I'll say one of the things that happened is that for some people that are listening, it wasn't just a school they wanted to go to, a career they wanted to pursue. There was actually a betrayal of trust. I had trusted you and I felt betrayed in that. And so this is how I'm going to deal with relationships from now on. I'm going to be much more guarded. I'm going to be much more, and just go like, I don't know. I don't think that's coming from Jesus. I think it's, I understand that the pain, what would cause somebody to say, well, who wants to do that again? And in the final analysis, you and I want to do that again. We don't want to feel the betrayal, but I don't want to end up like casting out all the love and the vulnerability and authenticity that goes with it. This is what if you're listening, this is what we're talking about, clearing the path. You just need to figure out some of these things. I went to a place called Onsite with Miles Adcox, who you know, and it was just like a really great time to just sort out some of that stuff. And I went kicking and screaming. I didn't want to go. Sweet Maria said, like, dude, you actually need to go.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And it was like a really great time. So a willingness to say, okay, I'm teachable.
Yeah, I like that thought of clearing the path, because when I think of that example that I use, I'm even having thoughts of how I've had to do that over the last 25 years. And when I think about, before I would clear those paths, to use your words, and I love it, it was hurting me so much. Like I was almost sabotaging my ability to have relationships and trust, because I was assuming that it was going to be just like it had been before. And I wasn't allowing myself to be fully present in some of those relationships. And so as I've cleared the path, as I've worked on those things, I'm starting to see, wow, I can actually be fully here and believe that you're fully here too, and not have to think that there's hurt around every corner.
Yeah, beautifully said. And so you got to like see it to understand it so that you can fix it, so you can do something. I remember the first time I was sitting down with pen and paper, and I've talked about having the position of like having your palms up, not in a creepy off-putting way, but to just like the position of your body and the position of your heart are usually aligned. So when I would be, as a lawyer, in some pretty contentious trials, I would be the guy with my palms up, but I wouldn't do it in a weird way that like the jury would think I was freaking out. But I would just like cup my hands like in front of me, just palms up. And I'm telling you, try it sometime. If you're get sideways with your husband or with somebody you work with or whatever, or you're listening to somebody on the television, as happens from time to time, and you go like, oh, I just want to rip your throat out. Just instead, just try it once. Just be like palms up, and just to say, man, I actually want to live releasing some of that. Stated differently, I want to clear the path. I think that's where the good stuff happens. And so, Jamie, thank you so much for spending a little time with us. How can people get a hold of you? They want to listen to your podcast, because I listen to it. I don't care if it's for girls or not. Tough.
I would love for you guys to come listen. It's called The Happy Hour with Jamie Ivey, and you can find it anywhere you find podcasts. The easiest place to find everything would just be jamieivey.com.
Yeah. And then you've got a book. Tell us about that. What's the premise?
I have a book that came out, I guess 2 years ago. It's called If You Only Knew. And it's my story. It's my story of finding freedom. It's about my faith journey. And I brought a lot of baggage into marriage, a lot of baggage into my relationship with Jesus, and just the way that he's helped me let go of shame and let go of guilt, and to live in freedom with who I am. And then I have a book that comes out this fall. So I'm super excited about that as well.
Oh, get out of town. What's the name?
It's called You Be You. Why success and satisfaction are closer than you think. Yeah, so I'm super excited about it.
Oh, good for you. Hey, and if you're listening, go grab all these books. But hey, I want you to write your book. You're listening, pull over to Wide Spot in the Road. Start with a word, expand to a sentence. Put 5 of those together, you got a paragraph. And instead of listening to the other things, write down what's a time and a thing that I need to clear the path on. And then as you write that thing down, to say, I'm going to take 20 seconds and make a courageous move towards that. I'm going to make a phone call. I'm going to send a text. I'm going to understand it so I can see it, so I can fix it. Jamie, thank you for making times for us. You're leading with love.
Thanks, Bob.
You know you've got dreams hidden down deep inside your heart. And maybe you didn't have what you felt like was the confidence to pursue them. Maybe you feel like you don't have the permission, or maybe you just don't know how to chase them, how to organize your life around your big ambitions. Well, after a long wait, Bob's new book is now available. It's the Dream Big book, and you can pick it up today. You can read it, like an old-fashioned book, you can also listen to it. Go to thedreambigbook.com and order your copy today. Well, Bob, setbacks, roadblocks, rejection, lost deals, disappointments, somehow I look at your life, you're able to handle all those things in stride. Like, what does that look like for you on the inside?
Oh, well, on the inside, we can be just raging. You just kind of want to put your fist through a wall sometimes, but don't do that. What I want to do, though, is to anticipate that there's going to be these headwinds that we're each going to face. And if you want to develop in yourself some character traits, patience, long suffering, just develop these characteristics that will carry you through. These would be the proving times. And that isn't just blowing sunshine at you. These are actually the opportunities. So you have something happen that you just didn't see coming. And what we're doing is we're developing our character. And so I'm still learning on this. I know you are, Scott. I know people that are listening are too. But what I want you to do is to count these things. And not all joy. I get the verse from James. But to actually say, okay, this is another opportunity for me to grow.
What helps me probably the most is getting to listen in to other people talk about their failures, their setbacks. I think it just makes me feel like I'm not alone. I'm not crazy. I'm not on this weird path that I shouldn't be on. In fact, I think a lot of resilience by listening in to other people validate my experience through their own failures.
Yeah, one of the things that I need to keep in mind constantly is that God never compares what he creates. And so he doesn't compare my pain to your pain or your pain to somebody else's pain. His pain is pain. Yet there's some stuff that God will do in growing us up in the middle of that. And so take notes, become a student of the setbacks and to say, what am I learning? Where's a place I can grow? How can it be a more present version of myself? And if faith is important to you, to say, I'm not just trying to make myself a better version of me. I'm trying to become a little bit more like Jesus.
Well, thanks everybody for listening in this week. And whatever setback, roadblock you're facing, we're with you.